I don't remember exactly when I first thought about infidelity. It could have been on a spring night when the city was still a bit chilly, and my husband was sound asleep beside me after a dull dinner and an hour spent intently glued to his laptop. I looked at the ceiling, my back pressed against the silk sheets my mother-in-law gave me as a wedding gift, and realized I was slowly fading away from my own life. My name is Lai. I'm 23 years old. I have an attractive face and a slender figure. People say I resemble a French girl in a painting. Deep eyes, thin lips, a long neck, and something in my gaze that makes men feel both curious and cautious. I married at 21. He's 7 years older than me, the epitome of the ideal man according to every Vietnamese mother. Owns a house, has a stable office job, doesn't smoke, avoids clubs, and always remembers the ancestor's death anniversary. But he's also the kind of man that, after kissing him 1,000 times, the feeling remains as lifeless as a concrete wall in the middle of a rainy season. Perhaps that's why I left. Not to run away, but to rediscover the feeling of being alive. That summer, I lied to him that I was going on a retreat with a group of old college friends. A feminist vacation to relax and meditate. In reality, I drove alone to a coastal town nearly 3 hours away from the city. It was a place where no one knew anyone, where no one cared who you were. That was what made me feel safe. I rented a small villa by the sea. Room 12. The wind blew strongly every evening. The sand was fine. The balcony faced the sunset. I chose that place not for the comfort, but because there I could let my shoulders drop, forget all the roles I play in everyday life, and not have to pretend to be the good wife for 72 hours. And then he appeared. He rented the room next to mine, room 11. I saw him for the first time when I was sitting on the balcony, barefoot with my feet resting on the chair, my thin silk dress fluttering in the wind. He was tall, about 40 years old, with sun-kissed skin like someone who had lived by the sea for many years, slightly long hair, left loose, and those eyes. Oh, those eyes looked at me as if I were dinner after a day of fasting, and I couldn't hide my gaze. I had been staring at his lips for so long that he gave a slight smile and nodded at me without saying a word. That night, I stood outside on the balcony, listening to soft jazz from my phone, holding a glass of red wine. And he came. No asking for my name, no invitation. He simply handed me another glass of wine, a more expensive, fragrant, stronger one, and said, "Your wine is finished." His voice was deep and slow. There was something in his tone that made me feel as though I were being hypnotized. I took the glass from him without hesitation, my lips touching the rim of the glass as if they were touching his lips. We stood next to each other, not too close, not too far. The sea breeze tangled in my hair, carrying the scent of salt and something as intoxicating as sensuality. He didn't look at me, only at the sea, but his hand lightly touched my wrist, a delicate touch that made my body react as if it had been shocked by electricity. At that moment, I knew I had crossed a boundary, but I didn't step back. I didn't pull his hand away. I didn't retreat into the room. I stood still, breathing slowly. My heart beat so fast I was afraid he could hear it. I leaned toward the sea and let him take me away. I don't know what happened first. The wine ran out, the wind stopped, or his gaze moved from the sea to rest on my neck. I only remember when he placed his hand on my waist, as lightly as if he were trying to touch a secret. I didn't shiver from fear. I shivered from anticipation. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice deep like a late-night jazz tune. I shook my head, but didn't answer. There was no need. My body had already spoken, my chest heaving beneath the thin silk dress, my feet pressed firmly to the wooden floor. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, like a wild drum being struck in the silence of the night sea. He stepped closer, a distance where, if he tilted his head, our lips would meet. But he didn't kiss me immediately. He simply raised his hand, gently pushing a damp lock of hair from my neck. His fingers traced the line of my collarbone, slow, probing, and full of magic. I gasped. He knew, and slowly, he whispered in my ear, I don't want to rush. If you change your mind, say it now. I turned my head, my eyes locking on his lips firm, salty, and tasting of red wine. I tilted my head and kissed him. Not gently, not shyly. My lips claimed his as if I were dying of thirst and he was the water. He responded, and everything after that faded away. All I could feel were his fingers sliding down my spine, then slipping under my dress, finding my skin, hot and burning like fire. I heard myself moan softly in my throat, a sound I had never heard from myself when I was with my husband. A raw instinct, a confession of flesh. He lifted me into the room, as if I weighed no more than a dream. He placed me gently on the bed. The room was dark, only the soft blue light from the night lamp reflecting on my bare skin slowly being revealed. He wasn't in a hurry. One button after another, he undid my blouse, my dress, as if unwrapping a carefully packaged gift that he had waited his whole life to touch. I let everything slip away. I didn't ask his name. I didn't ask if he had a wife. I didn't want to know. That night, I was no longer Lai, the wife of the orderly man. I was something else, wild, burning, and free. We made love as if the night sea was swallowing us whole. No rejection, no morality intruding. Only breaths, waves, and the sound of flesh meeting flesh, as if we were made to belong to each other. Afterwards, I lay on my side, my head resting on his arm. His chest rose and fell. We didn't say a word. No one needed to. I remember whispering, almost in a dream, "Will you still be here tomorrow?" He didn't answer. He just pulled me closer, and I understood. He didn't make promises. He wasn't that kind of man. He carried me to the bed, laying me down like an offering in the moonlight. The silky sheet slid under my back, cold but stimulating. The nightlight cast undulating shadows on my skin, as if my body were molded from damp sand and afternoon sunlight. He knelt between my thighs, looking at me as if contemplating a taboo he had long suppressed. Then he leaned down. His lips did not rush to find mine. He started at my collarbone, kissing slowly, gently, making me arch as if electrified. Each touch was a wave. When his lips slid down between my breasts, I let out a soft sound, as if I had not expected my body to crave it so much. He used his tongue, sliding slowly around my breast, then suddenly sucking hard on one, making me arch my back unconsciously. My hands clenched his hair, my mouth gasping. The feeling, wet, warm, hard, made me lose control. Then he moved lower. His hands parted my thighs, lifted my skirt, and slid across my lower belly to the edge where I had already been soaking wet. He didn't have to ask. He knew I was ready. When his lips touched there, wet, soft, deep, I almost jumped up, but he held me back. His hands pinned my thighs to the bed, his mouth doing things I'd never imagined a man could do. He used his tongue wildly like he was reading a song with his tongue, and my body responded like a well-tuned instrument. I gripped the sheets, moaning softly. No need to hide it. I didn't have to be good here. I don't remember how long, but I almost melted when he lifted his head, looking at me with his animal eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked, his breath hot against my belly. I didn't answer. I pulled him up, letting his lips meet mine again, the salty taste of myself still there. And then he entered me, slowly, very slowly, as if he were sliding into a forbidden world. I leaned forward, catching him, and we both let out a gasp in unison. He began to move, the first stroke like a wave, the second, harder, and then gradually he stopped holding back. Each thrust was a tidal wave, deep, steady, merciless. I wrapped my legs around his back, holding on, pulling him deeper. Each time he bottomed out, I heard myself moan, my throat tight with pleasure. We were like two animals, neither leading, neither mastering. He turned me around onto my side, and from behind he entered me again. Hard, deep, sensual. I tilted my head back, my lips parted, letting him whisper words into my ear that had no beginning or end. His voice hoarse, wet, and rough like the night at sea. Finally, when he squeezed my waist, pressing one last time, I felt like my whole body exploded into pieces of pleasure. He shivered, buried his face in the nape of my neck, and we both breathed as if we had just swum across the ocean. The room was quiet again, only the sound of our heartbeats and the distant waves. I lay there, my hands on his chest, our skin sweaty, warm, pressed together as one. I didn't ask anything. He didn't say anything. There were nights when words weren't needed, just our bodies, and the truth was in the middle of our beats. I fell asleep in his arms, not knowing that when I woke up in the morning, he wouldn't be there. I woke up to the sunlight streaming through the curtains, golden and warm like a gentle greeting of the early morning. The bed sheets were still warm, the smell of flesh and wine still lingering around me like a sweet echo of last night. I turned, reaching out to find him. Empty. Only the pillow was sunken, and a fold of the blanket was still wrinkled where he had lain. "You," I called softly as if by reflex. There was no answer. I wrapped the blanket around myself, stepped outside. The living room was empty. The door to the balcony was open, but no one was there. Not a sound, only the sound of the waves still murmuring unchanged. I felt my heart skip a beat, as if I had just woken up from a dream too beautiful to be real. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, no trace of his existence that night, except my body, still sweetly sore. I opened the fridge. The wine was gone. The glass was still on the counter. There was my lip print, and his handprint on the neck of the glass. A fragile piece of evidence between two worlds, last night and reality. I sat down, the blanket still wrapped around me. The question kept repeating in my head. Who are you? I didn't know his name, no phone number. Didn't know what hotel he was staying at. Wasn't even sure if he was here permanently or just a guest passing through this shore for a few days. I went back to bed, opened the nightstand. It was empty. No note, no message. I checked my wallet. There was enough money. My watch was still on my wrist. Nothing was missing, except him. I laughed, a laugh that was half angry, half surprised. I had just been dumped after a night of cheating by a man with no name, no number, and no goodbye. I lie? The woman who has lived her whole life within limits, just slipped into a moment of adventure. And now I am falling freely into a dream that has no end. And strangely, I do not feel regret. I feel curious. I changed clothes, went down to the hotel lobby, asked the receptionist if there was a tall, tanned man about 30 years old with slightly curly hair staying here. The receptionist smiled politely. "Sorry, we cannot disclose customer information." I understood. But her eyes said more than words. She had seen him, and perhaps I was not the only woman who asked about him. I returned to my room, lay down on the bed. Everything was spinning in my head like an unfinished song. That night, I went to the beach alone. I wore a thin white dress, no bra. The wind blew through every crack of fabric, like his old hand was caressing me for the last time. I sat down in the same place where we had drunk last night, watched the sea, and began. I poured myself a glass of wine, looked at the water sparkling in the moonlight. For a moment, I thought I saw his figure in the distance, tall, slow, walking on the sand. But he wasn't. He was just a stranger, a shadow passing through my life, and he, that nameless man, took the most beautiful night of my life away without leaving a trace, not even a name. But I knew one thing. From that night on, I was no longer the same woman. I left the beach on the third day, as empty as the room he left behind. No one knew what had happened. No one understood what I had lost. For who would know that I had found him? Or rather, that I had found myself? In the middle of a night of sea breezes, wine, and naked desire. I returned to New York. The high-rise apartment was cold with ivory walls and a bed that had never been as hot as it had been on the beach. My husband did not suspect anything. He was as busy as ever. Work, meetings, partners, relationships that I was never allowed to question. I still played the good wife, still smiled, still accompanied him to fancy parties, still wore the high heels he liked, even though every step felt like stepping on thorns. But something in me had changed. I knew it. I looked at other men differently, no longer avoiding, no longer hesitant. I knew what my body could do, and I knew what I wanted, without waiting for someone else to define it for me. I started wearing shorter skirts. My eyeliner was thicker. My lipstick was redder. I realized my own power. I had been sand, blown away by the wind. Now I was fire, gentle, yet ready to burn. I went back to the gym. His toned body, the men's furtive glances as I walked by, all fueled the fire inside me. But at night, I still thought about him, about that look, about his lips moving across my skin like waves that never stopped, about the moment he breathed into my neck, whispering nonsense that I would remember forever. I never called him by name, and maybe I never needed to know. One night, after a year-end party for my husband's company, I returned home earlier than expected. The rain was falling lightly. The city seemed to have just been washed clean. I took off my heels, held them in my hands, and walked barefoot into the lobby. The elevator doors opened, and I came face to face with him. Yes, it was him. The same eyes, the same tanned face, the same stubble as if he had just woken up from a dream. He looked at me, not smiling, not surprised, as if he knew he would see me again, in this place, at this very moment. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. "You're still beautiful," he said, his voice low, cold, and gentle as rain. I stood still. The elevator doors closed behind him. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me for a moment, then pulled his hand out of his pocket, holding out a hotel room key, the same floor I lived on. "I thought you wanted to know why, but sometimes we don't need a reason to come back, just a reason not to go." I didn't know what to say. The woman who cried when a man disappeared without a trace, now stood here, my heart pounding like a 16-year-old girl who had just kissed her for the first time. He leaned close to my ear. "I still remember the smell of your sweaty skin. I remember the way you moaned my name even though you never asked me." Then he left, walking slowly, not looking back. I stood there, in the silent hallway, listening to my heart beat like a knock on the door of the past. He was back, but this time I would not let myself fall again. My apartment was quiet that night, as usual, but today was different. I knew something was about to happen. That feeling always came to me when I thought of him. When I entered the living room, the dim light reflected off the large mirror on the wall. Everything was quiet, but inside me, a wave was rising. Then I saw him. He stood at the balcony door, his eyes looking out, his broad and strong shoulders standing out in the dim light. The uninvited guest. The guest had disappeared without a trace. Now, he was here again. And this time, he was no longer a ghost. "What are you looking for me for?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, even though I tried to control it. He didn't answer right away. He just turned around, his eyes sharp, as if he had recognized everything in me. It was no longer a strange look, but the look of a man who knew every corner of my soul. "You know why?" he said, stepping closer to me. Not quickly, not hastily, but each step carried an undeniable force. I took a step back, but there was nowhere to hide. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. It was from desire, a feeling I had never felt before. He moved closer. Now, the distance between us was only a few centimeters. He raised his head, looking deep into my eyes. "You're still the same lie, still full of desire, still wanting." I didn't say anything. There was no need to say more. My body had spoken, as if it had been waiting for this for a long time. He reached out, gently lifted my chin, pressed his lips to mine, and I immediately accepted, as if these lips had been familiar to me for ages. His kiss was warm, strong, as if forcing me into a world I didn't want to escape. We both fell into the kiss. He bit my lower lip lightly, making me moan softly. A sudden desire flared up inside me. I couldn't hold back anymore. My hands found his shirt, pulling it up, without hesitation. He paused for a moment, his eyes searching mine. "Aren't you scared?" he asked, his voice low, but perhaps he knew the answer. "No," I replied almost without thinking. He didn't answer anymore. Everything happened in silence. He pulled me into his arms, removing every layer of clothing on my body, letting our bodies touch each other in a burning sensation. His fingers slid across my skin as if carving deep marks that only he could see. My body trembled as he touched my sensitive area, his hand moving constantly, both gentle and strong. Every time he touched me, I moaned, unable to stay awake. The feeling was so strong that I couldn't stop. He didn't rush. He wanted me to feel every caress, every finger that slid across my skin like a burning fire. When he pulled me into his arms again, this time it wasn't slow. He entered me forcefully, without any restraint. Each thrust made me throw my head back, my hands clutching at him, as if wanting him to go deeper. I couldn't keep my composure anymore. My body welcomed him, welcomed every rhythm, every thrust, every emotion inside me shattered, uncontrollable. His lips sought my neck, sucking hard on my skin, leaving me breathless. I could only feel his every movement, every powerful thrust that made my body explode. He held me, not letting me escape. Each powerful thrust made me unable to hold myself. My body convulsed in waves of pleasure, and as he tightened his arms around me, we reached our climaxes together, panting, sweat dripping down our slits, merging together. He didn't pull away from me immediately. We both lay there, panting, not saying a word, just our hearts pounding, merging together like the waves crashing against the shore. But I knew one thing. After tonight, everything would change. I was no longer the woman I used to be. I had seen things I couldn't ignore. And he, that man, had left a deep wound in me. A wound I didn't know if it could ever heal. Last night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning, not because of his lack, but because of the feeling that I wanted to take control. I couldn't continue being a puppet in his hands. My feelings for him were strong enough, but I wanted to test myself. Test him. Entering the bathroom the next morning, I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself anymore. Who was the woman looking back at me? The girl who loved a man and threw everything away? Or the strong one who didn't want to be caught up in the whirlpool of sex and emotions? No, I wasn't that girl anymore. I wore a tight red dress, revealing my smooth skin and seductive curves. My hair was long, falling like a soft silk. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time, smiled slightly, and then walked out of the room. He had been on my mind all night, and I knew now would be the right time for him to come back. I wasn't the one looking for him anymore. Now I would make him look for me. I sent him a short text message, simply, "Tonight, I'll wait for you." Then I left no explanation. That's how I played this game. I didn't need to give a reason, didn't need to explain. He just came, and he did. He appeared while I was sitting on the sofa, my red dress fluttering, my eyes looking far away as if I didn't care. But in fact, I felt his every move, my heartbeat as he walked in. "You waiting for me?" he asked, his voice low, seductive but also a little suspicious. I just nodded, not saying another word. The answer was obvious. He understood that things were different now, and he couldn't ignore a woman like me. "You know," he stepped closer to me, placing his hand on my shoulder. "We were never over, were we?" I looked at him, my eyes flickering to his fingers, then turned back to face him. "Do you think we're really over?" I asked, a smirk on my face. He paused, as if considering my question, but I didn't give him time to react. I stood up, walked closer to him, my eyes never leaving his. "I've changed. I'm not that scared girl anymore. I want to test you. See if you can keep up with me." He looked at me silently, then suddenly pulled me towards him, kissing me fiercely on the lips. The feeling of him made me dizzy. I knew this wouldn't be like last time. Everything was different, and I was different. When we broke the kiss, I said nothing. Raising my hand, I gently stroked his face. "Are you patient enough?" I asked, but I didn't wait for his answer. For me, the game began from this moment. We both started a game. I didn't let him have me so easily. I didn't rush into giving him my body. I tested him little by little to see what he would do, to see if he could wait for me as patiently as I waited for him. I pulled back when he came closer. I didn't let him touch me when he wanted to. Every time he came closer, I stepped back, forcing him to chase me. He wanted me, but I wanted him to really want me. Want me so badly that he couldn't live without me. Finally, after several tense minutes, he couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled me into his arms, kissed me again, this time without doubt, without holding back. We were ready. I took him without hesitation. What he felt inside me this time was no longer unconscious passion, but something deeper, an unbreakable connection. Pain and pleasure mingled in every rhythm. We were inseparable. He pushed me into a wave of passion that I couldn't control. The sensations surged like waves crashing on the shore. Our bodies were intertwined, no more distance, no more games. I knew that, even though I had tested him, I couldn't stop loving him in the end. And neither could he. We had reached the point of no return. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The emotions inside me were like an uncontrollable undercurrent. I was challenging him, but I was also challenging myself. And for the first time, I realized that I was lost in the game I created. That night, when I sat alone on the sofa, the dim light reflecting on the large mirror, I no longer recognized myself. The look in the mirror was not of a free, strong girl, but of a woman torn between conflicting emotions. I let him dominate everything, and now I couldn't control myself. I was tired. Tired because I was lost in a spiral with no way out, where emotions and desires could not be clearly separated. This feeling was not love, not sex, but possession, an indispensable need. I needed him, but I didn't want to admit it. I sighed, sat up, and picked up the phone. A text from him. The words were simple, but they were like a punch to my heart. "Are you okay?" A simple question, but it made me confused. The question was not just for my body, but for my soul. Was I okay? Could I escape this obsession? I texted back without thinking. "I'm okay." But in fact, I was not okay at all. He called right after that. There was a moment of silence. No one said anything, just the sound of both of us breathing heavily. He knew I was not okay, but he did not let go, and I could not pull away either. "You don't have to say it. I know you are not okay." His voice was soft, but full of understanding. I was sad, not knowing what to say. I had challenged him, but I was the one being challenged. The meetings, the burning nights were not for me to overcome him, but for me to face myself. I lied to myself that I just wanted to test him, but in fact, I was afraid of the feeling of dependence on him. "You know I can't live without you, right?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't want to admit it, but I couldn't deny the truth either. This feeling, the feeling that I once considered freedom, control, was now like an invisible shackle, tying me up. He was right. I couldn't live without him, and I couldn't escape him either. Every time he came close, every time he touched me, I felt like I was being drawn into an unstoppable whirlwind, but I couldn't let myself be so weak. I had to do something to escape, to not become a puppet in his hands. Everything, no matter how intense, has its limits. I put down my phone, stood up, and walked out onto the balcony. The night sky covered the entire city, the lights twinkling in the distance like dim stars. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind of the vague thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about him. He wasn't the only one who could possess me. I used to live alone, independent and strong. But now, depending on him made me feel weak and helpless, and that was what I couldn't accept. It wasn't loving him, it was loving myself. I had to find freedom again, even if it was painful. The next day, I didn't contact him. I took time for myself to reflect on what had happened. And the more I thought, the more I realized that it wasn't love that I needed to find again, but myself. The feeling of independence, the feeling that I can stand on my own without someone to lean on. I am not a weak person. I can live without him, and I will. But deep down, I know that this relationship cannot end. He will come back, and this time, I will not let myself be caught up in that whirlwind again. The next day, I woke up feeling different. Even though I told myself that I wouldn't let myself get caught up in him again, the reality wasn't that easy. I couldn't keep living in torment, couldn't keep avoiding this deep feeling. But this time, I didn't intend to let myself sink deeper into a relationship that I couldn't control. I had to be stronger. I had to take control of my life, not let love or lust control me. I looked in the mirror, looking at myself for a long time. Now I was no longer the weak girl of the first nights. I had changed. I was no longer afraid to face these feelings. I was no longer afraid to face him. I was ready to face anything that could happen. Even though I knew that he wouldn't give up easily, I wasn't someone who would be easily dragged back into that painful cycle. I had to show him that I was not someone who could be easily taken advantage of. I sent him a short message. We need to talk. Just such a short message, but it had a deep meaning. It was no longer an invitation full of hidden meanings or ambiguity. This was a necessary meeting, one that could not be delayed. He replied quickly, as I had predicted. "You want to see me?" I did not reply, just waited. I really did not need to say anything more. We both knew that this conversation would decide everything. When he arrived, I did not run to hug him like the previous times. I did not appear to be in a hurry or flustered like before. I sat down on the sofa, my eyes looking at him calmly. I was not afraid. There was nothing for me to be afraid of anymore. He looked at me. His eyes no longer had the strength I had seen in the past. Something in that look had changed. Maybe it was an acknowledgement, a sense of something deeper than just a physical relationship. But I didn't want to see his weakness. I wanted to see him strong, like me. "Are you okay?" he asked, a little worried. I smiled slightly, but said nothing. Instead of answering him, I stood up and walked closer. My hands were on his shoulders, but this time the feeling was different. It wasn't weakness or desire. It was control, initiative on my part. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about us," I said, my voice soft but firm. And I realized something very important. I can't live for you. I can't live in a relationship that I don't control. He looked at me, a little surprised, but said nothing. I continued. "I don't need you to feel complete. I've lived alone, and I can continue like this. But I can't just live in the shadow of a relationship like this." He didn't say anything, but I could feel the change in his eyes. He was understanding that I was no longer the girl he could easily grasp. I didn't need to explain further. It was all in his eyes and his barely spoken words. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked, his voice a little urgent, but no longer the strength I had seen. He was examining me, trying to understand me better, but I didn't let him have it easy. "I won't let myself get caught up in this relationship anymore," I replied, my eyes flickering over his face once more. "I won't go back to you." And then, in that moment, I realized the most important thing. I wasn't the one running away from him. I was the one who walked away to set myself free. Freedom wasn't about escaping him. It was about escaping what I had put myself through. We didn't need to say anything more. I turned away, no more goodbyes or regrets. He stood there, and I knew this relationship was over. But in my heart, there was still something uncertain. We had been too close. There had been too many nights of passion and desire. And now, I had to face the emptiness. But I knew that I would be okay, because I had regained control. This relationship was over, and I was going to live my life. That was the most important thing. After breaking up with him, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads in my life, where there was no clear path. The first days after leaving, everything was vague and empty. I still lived in his memories, in mixed emotions that I could not completely let go of. But now I realized one important thing. I needed to move on, needed to renew myself, find myself again. Every morning, I woke up earlier, no longer waking up in tormenting dreams about him, but as a girl starting over. At first, it felt strange, as if I was trying to get used to a completely new life without him in it. But gradually, I began to feel free. My first day after this decision came, I walked alone in the park, breathing in the fresh air that I had not felt for a long time. For a long time, I had forgotten the feeling of freedom in peaceful, lonely mornings. I even forgot the comfort of not having to worry about whether he would show up or not. I just needed to live for myself. I signed up for a yoga class, something I had never tried before. Every twist of my body made me feel like a part of me was being rebuilt, as if I was rebuilding each piece of my shattered soul. Yoga not only made me physically flexible, but also mentally stronger. I began to love myself, not through the eyes of others, but through my own feelings. It was only then that I realized that, in the past, I had relied too much on relationships to feel worthy. Now I understood that my self-worth did not need to be determined by the eyes of others. I was the only one who could determine my own worth. In the evenings, when the night fell, I no longer felt as lonely as before. Instead of dwelling on him, I started reading books, taking online classes, and finding new hobbies. I learned about art, about music, and even tried writing, something I had never done before. Every evening, I felt like I was opening up a part of the world that I had previously ignored. A week later, I met a new man. He was an old classmate, someone I had never expected to meet again under these circumstances. He was not like him, not the type of man who would send me into a whirlwind of intense emotions. He was calm, sincere, and did not force me into any kind of framework. We talked for a long time, but there was no such intense feeling as I had experienced with him. This made me feel relieved. He understood me, but did not try to possess me. We laughed about the little things in life, shared our views on the future without impatience or longing. I began to realize that a relationship doesn't always have to be a battle for each other's hearts. Sometimes a simple and gentle relationship is what I need. A month has passed, and I have changed. I no longer feel like I am running away from someone or something. I am no longer haunted by dreams about him. I can breathe deeply without feeling suffocated. Life is still full of challenges, but I have learned to face them with more confidence. I know that I don't need to find perfection or satisfaction in someone else, but that I am the one who creates my own value and happiness. Now I can look back on the past without feeling regret or pain. I know that the relationship, no matter how intense, was just a part of the journey to find myself. I have learned to love myself, knowing that when I love myself, I can love someone else completely. That weekend, I was out on a beach at sunset, where the waves were lapping at the shore. The feeling of the gentle ocean breeze was soothing all my stress away. I stood there, free, confident, and feeling that my journey of self-discovery was just beginning. I smiled, not because I had found anything specific, but because I had found myself. No more constraints, no more doubts or worries. I was me, and I deserved the best that life had to offer. Day by day, I feel myself changing in a positive way. Every morning, I wake up with a relaxed spirit, no longer worried about the past, but instead with a desire to explore the new opportunities that life is giving me. I am no longer the weak girl of the past, always looking for harmony from someone to feel complete. Now I understand that only I can bring myself fullness and peace. And then, one afternoon, when I was walking in the park as usual, I accidentally met him again. Not him, the man I used to know, but another version of him, a quieter and calmer person. He is no longer the person I thought would always drag me back into the uncontrollable emotional whirlwinds. This time, when I look at him, I see a more mature man, but I do not feel the same strong attachment as before. We stood facing each other, not with haunted looks, but with understanding and acceptance. "Are you okay?" he asked, not with concern this time, but with genuine concern. I smiled. "Better than ever," I replied, and felt a sense of relief as I said it. There was no more pressure or regret. I was really okay. He nodded slightly and then fell silent. We said nothing more. Not because our stories were lacking, but because we understood each other so well. We had been in a world where we could not fully belong to each other, but now we could stand together. No more pain, no more attachment. After that meeting, I began to realize something else. I did not need to rush through this life. I was so used to searching for goals, seeking recognition from others, but now I know that true satisfaction comes from the small moments in life, from slowing down and accepting things as they are. I no longer race against time or against society's expectations. I began to learn to live freely, love myself, and accept all the new things that life brings. Sometimes I travel alone, explore new places, and sometimes I simply sit by the beach, watch the sunset, and feel the breath of life. A year later, I no longer remember the mixed feelings about him, nor do I feel anxious about imperfect relationships. I have learned to love myself completely, and even though new relationships appear in my life, I no longer place too much expectation or hope on anyone. One evening, I sat at my usual table in my favorite coffee shop, watching the twinkling lights outside the window. I realized that I could sit quietly by myself without feeling lonely. A new sense of freedom, a sense of not depending on anyone else. I felt at peace. Although life was still full of challenges, I learned how to face them and was no longer afraid. I learned that life is a continuous journey, not to find a destination, but to live fully in the present moment. I could love again, but this time I don't need to seek perfection. My relationship with myself is strong enough, and if someone comes along, I will welcome them with an open heart, but I know that I will not let them be the sole reason for my happiness. My happiness comes from me. That weekend, I went to a quiet beach where I could see the waves crashing on the shore, and in the wind, I felt freedom. I stood there, lost in the vastness, wondering if I was on the right path. And I realized that there is no single right path. My journey is still going on, and I will live each moment to the fullest. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I am no longer afraid. I have found myself on this journey, and that is the most important thing. One morning when I woke up, I didn't feel tired or heavy. I was so used to mornings when every step I took was towards a promising day. No matter what challenges life presented, I no longer felt afraid of them. Instead, I accepted them as part of the journey I was on. I began to see new opportunities coming my way, not because I was looking for them, but because I opened my mind to new things. One of the most obvious changes was my work. I decided to change direction and embark on a new project. In contrast to before, when I only wanted to pursue stability, I was now more adventurous, trying things that I had not dared to think of before. This new project not only challenged me, but also helped me discover new aspects of myself. I no longer worked to live, but to explore and create. I gradually rebuilt my confidence in my work, no longer feeling afraid of failure or being left behind. This project helped me find a passion that I never thought I would have. But beyond work, I also began to realize that the relationships I had abandoned before were not because I wanted to run away, but because I needed space to grow. I no longer considered others as the only source of fulfillment in my life. The new friends I made during this time became an important part of my journey. We didn't share the intense emotions of love, but we had real conversations, deep connections that I had never experienced before. In those moments, I realized something important. Loving yourself and knowing your worth is essential to building healthy and lasting relationships. Love doesn't always have to come with sacrifice or pain. Sometimes love is simply understanding and respecting each other. One day I met him again, but not the old him, but someone else, as if we were strangers meeting again after a long time. Everything between us was no longer tense or full of anticipation. All the intense emotions I had once felt seemed to have faded with time. This time, when I looked into his eyes, I saw a gentleness, no longer the struggle or anxiety like before. He looked at me with eyes that were no longer filled with regret or longing, but with understanding. "You've changed," he said. And I realized, not only had I changed, but we had both grown up in our own ways. I smiled softly, no longer feeling regret about the past. "Yes," I replied, "and I think we're on the right track." We sat down on a park bench, not saying much. The silence between us was no longer tense but peaceful. We understood each other better, but no longer tried to change each other. Sometimes understanding and acceptance are all that is needed in a relationship. And then, as the days passed, I no longer lived in anxiety about the future or fear of what was yet to come. Every day, I did things I loved, learned things I had never tried, and opened my heart to new things. I no longer chased after unrealistic ideals, but instead accepted the imperfections of life and found peace within myself. Once again, I returned to the beach where I stood when I first wondered about my future. The sea breeze blew through my hair, the waves lapped against the shore, and I felt a strong connection to the world around me. I don't need to look for happiness in others anymore, because I have learned that happiness starts with me. There is no rush, no worry. I have found freedom within myself, and that is the most important thing. No matter what life throws at me, I know that I am ready to face any challenge that lies ahead. I will keep learning, keep discovering, and keep loving myself. I don't know what will come, but I am ready to embrace it all with an open heart and a free mind. My journey is still long, but I have found peace in every step, and I know that no matter what, I will always walk with faith in myself. Life is constantly changing. What I once thought was unchanging has now become the past, leaving only gentle memories, no longer worrying or wondering. I realized that changes in life, although they seem to be challenges at first, are actually valuable opportunities to help me grow and become stronger. No one can avoid change, and the most important thing is to learn to accept it. A month after meeting him again, I really began to feel the transformation in myself. The vague thoughts and overwhelming emotions no longer dominated my mind. I learned to live fully in the present and appreciate what I have. Time has healed the wounds, and I no longer feel the need to rush to find a perfect life. This life, with all its ups and downs, is a colorful and interesting journey. That day, as I sat on a wooden chair near the sea, closing my eyes and feeling the cool breeze blowing across my face, I realized that I no longer felt empty or lonely. I had found peace within myself. The past few months have helped me understand that love is not just about intense emotions, but also about understanding, about accompanying each other through life's challenges. Late one evening, when I returned from a late workday, my phone rang. A new message from him, the man who had once been an important part of my life. "I miss you," were short words, but they made my heart swell with a strange emotion. Miss? I wondered, while I had stopped for a long time. But then I realized not all emotions need to be understood immediately. Sometimes emotions are simply a feeling that comes and goes, without needing to be analyzed too much. I looked at the phone screen and smiled slightly. We had changed, and we might never be the same again. But I didn't feel sad or regretful. I just felt at peace. Not long after, I got a call from him. I decided to pick up the phone, not because I still loved him, but because I was mature enough to face the past without fear. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and warm. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, and a silence fell over us. No more words were needed. No more explanation was needed. We understood each other. The connection between us now wasn't one of longing or regret, but one of calm, of silent understanding. The next day, I decided to do something I'd never dared to do before. I took a yoga class. I had heard many people talk about the benefits of meditation and yoga in helping the body and mind become peaceful, but I had never really tried it. I wanted to expand my experience, to find something new in life. The yoga class was very gentle, and I found that the movements, the deep breathing, all helped me return to myself. I felt the relaxation in every muscle, the stillness in my mind. It was a moment when I truly felt like I was living in the present, not worrying about the past or the future. This feeling was really wonderful. I decided to continue taking these yoga classes. I did not set a goal to be good at it right away or to achieve amazing results. I just wanted to find peace within myself. And I knew that when I live in the present, nothing is impossible. Although my life is still full of challenges, I have learned to face and accept them. I am no longer afraid of change, but instead I embrace everything with a calm and confident attitude. I no longer have to race against time or other people's expectations. My life is mine, and I will live it the way I want. I look out at the sea, where the waves crash against the shore. I have found freedom in my soul, and now I will constantly seek new opportunities, new joys in life. It is never too late to start a new journey, and I am ready to accept everything new that life brings. I know that no matter what happens, I will always stand firm on my own 2 feet. And when I look back on the journey, I can be proud that I have learned to love myself, find peace, and continue to grow. My life continues, but I am no longer afraid or worried. I found freedom within myself, and that's all I needed.